Hello, Daddy's thinking again.
This is my old workshop seat or stool, a bit like a bar stool. It's got a rotary top and it's seen better days really. It's from Machine Mart, which is a bit like Harbour Freight, I guess. And the original top all disintegrated and fell to bits, and I made a new wooden base underneath, and I put a new pad on the top and reused the vinyl that came with the seat. But this is all now cracking and splitting, so it's time to make a new top. And I thought I'd make something much more hard wearing and arty, so I'm going to make a leather one. I start by the tedious job of prising all these old staples off the baseboard. Just using a variety of tools, and there we are, there's the baseboard. And I bought this offcut of veg tan leather off eBay, and I'm just using one of my homemade knives to roughly cut out a circle. I've made a template out of some MDF. This is just a rough cut first of all, and I then scratch the exact circle around the template, remove the template, and then cut it out with my knife. You need really sharp tools when working with leather, so I'm stropping it. Strop my tools quite a few times while working. Just finish off the cut. And it gives a lovely cut. This knife has got just the right blade shape. It's got a nice curve on it. Measuring the base, measuring the foam, so then I can work out how deep the sides need to be for my project. So I'm now cutting out the sides. This is thinner leather I'm using for the sides. The top was very thick, almost 4mm, and this is 1.5mm. I was just test fitting it around the template. It's got to overlap slightly. I had to do it in two sections because I didn't have any leather long enough. And I'm using some contact adhesive here just to glue the seam together. This is very strong, but it's really only there to hold the joint together while it's stitched. So line it up, press it down, and then I use a cobbler's hammer just to make sure it's properly bonded. These things go by many names, commonly called a pricking iron. It's sort of like a fork with 4 prongs, and you use that to get nice equal spaced holes ready for stitching. You hammer that right through. If you overlap each time, you get a nice even stitch. Doing 2 lines of stitching on this joint, probably not necessary, but it looks nice. And now I'm measuring out some Ritzer Tiger thread. This is 1mm waxed thread, and I'm doing about 6 times the length that I need. Threading the needle, this is a special way of threading these needles. There's plenty of information on how you do it, but you thread it through the eye and then push the point of the needle through the tail, and it forms sort of a slip knot which you then pull up to the eye. Using a homemade stitching pony or clam, this holds the work in place. And then you thread the needle through. You've got a needle on each end of the thread. Thread it to halfway, and then you start saddle stitching. So needle through, hold up the stitch out of the way, put the second needle through, wrap the thread round the needle, and then pull it tight. So first needle through, pull the thread out of the way so you don't catch it with the second needle through, wrap the thread round and pull it tight. You do get into a bit of a rhythm with this. I was very rusty really doing this. Just wrap the thread round each time. It forms a little knot then. So it's a very, very secure stitch. So needle through, pull the line up the way, wrap it round, pull that through. And over and over and over again. It's quite difficult to film actually, but first needle through, pull the thread up out of the way, second needle through, wrap the thread round and pull it tight. But yeah, it's a long job. And my fingers got rather sore. Now you can see the stitch from the outside. I'm just doing a couple of stitches showing you from the outside, but you can see how they all lay neatly. Then just finishing off, I tie a knot in the end because this won't show, and then melt it down and flatten it. Hammer it because it makes the stitches lay nice. Just marking the overlap. Then I bond the other joint with some contact adhesive again, and hammer it again. Make sure it's nicely bonded. And then it's the same process again. More saddle stitching. I was very rusty, haven't done this for a long time, and it did take me a long while to get into the swing of doing this, but positioning the side onto the template now, and I'm wetting the top of the leather, or just around on the outside and the inside, because this will help me fold the leather. The veg tan leather is quite dry and stiff. If you wet it, it becomes very pliable. Using an upholstery staple gun here, and I've stapled it all round, and then you hammer it flat, and the leather actually moulds. I'm wet moulding it in effect. I put the wooden base on the top just to keep it all flat while it dries. Now here's the leather top that I cut out earlier. This is a stitch groover, and it spaces a groove around the side, and a very nice tool to use. And then I'm using a number 2 beveler just to take that sharp cut edge off the leather to make it a nice rounded edge. And all these tools I strop regularly as well to keep them sharp. Now we're back to more stitch punching, this time using a 2-pronged iron because I'm going around a curve. I don't want straight lines. Well, there's the top for my seat, all cut out. I've done the edging and I've done all the punching for the stitch holes using a 2-pronged stitching iron, pricking iron, just to get the spacing right on a curve. I've beveled the edge. I did a stitch groove first, so that the stitches sit just below the surface so they don't get caught on things and worn out. You try and do as much as you can before wetting this. The next stage is going to involve what we call casing the leather, or wetting it. And once you do that, the leather's easily marked. So I'll try and get all these bits done first. I'm a bit rusty at all this. It's been a long while since I've done any. But I'm going to try something new on this. Originally, I was just going to do some pyrography, with my Peter Child pyrography burner and burner design on. But as a maker, it's good to push yourself a little bit and learn new techniques, because it's often a hybridisation of these techniques that it's the mother of invention in a way. You can put all these different skills together and come up with new ideas. So what I'm going to try and do on this is some tooling. So we're going to do I've done stamping of leather quite a bit, but I'm actually going to try and emboss a design using some special stamps. And I'm going to carve the leather first using a leather carving knife, a little swivel knife, which will be a first for me. This is a swivel knife. You can see it's got a little blade on the end and a finger rest on the top, and you can turn it and guide it and control it like that. It's got quite steep bevels each side, so it's not got a particularly fine edge. It's a sharp edge, and I've mirror polished it. It's very, very sharp. I've worked it on stones and on a strop to get that really nice edge, and with all leather tools you keep them stropped and sharp. And the way you use this is you hold it between those 2 fingers. That's the finger to apply the pressure. These 2 control it. You keep it upright in relation to the direction of the cut, but you slope it away from you and you pull it towards you. So you're only using one corner at a time, half of the blade at a time. and when that half dulls, you can always turn it around and use the other bit because you're angling it like that. But this is the first one of these I've bought, and it's a cheap one. These are so cheap on eBay. Having messed about with it, I've done a couple of experimental bits with it. I would like to get a better quality one next time I do one of these projects, because it had a bit of a rough edge. It took quite a bit of work to get this edge on, and the edge doesn't hold as well as it could, but it'll do the job. And in fact, leatherworking tools have never been so cheap. You can buy these enormous kits with everything you need, allegedly, and which is a good way to get yourself set up. Although a lot of the cost is in the leather itself and the different treatments and things to put on the leather. But yeah, we'll see how we get on. Here's a little piece I did, just messing about, practicing, cutting out, and then what I'm doing is I'm cutting the lines around the design, and then I'm using a beveling stamp, a little beveler, to keep this edge raised. So where you've made the cut, you dip one side. You can buy bevelers, but I thought I'd make some because I want a nice smooth bevel. So there's one. It's got a slope on it, and it's made of stainless steel. These were so easy to make, really simple. I used, like I say, stainless steel rod, round bar, sloped the top, rounded it all. Some I've put, one I've put to a point, one I've put to a tight radius, and the other's a bigger radius. And I just polished them on the buffing wheel so that they're like glass. I've made another one, which I've lost, out of a stainless steel bolt, and exactly the same. It's just a bigger beveling tool for doing these long curves that part of my logo is formed from. So and that's how we do it. The idea is you do lots of little taps and move it along so you avoid dents and ridges. You want a nice smooth bevel. Well, that's the idea. We'll see how we get on. And here you can see the sort of bevel I can get with the 3 different shapes I've created. And like I say, they're all polished stainless steel. And what I'm going to do is actually do my logo on the seat. I've got a stencil, and I'm going to scratch the logo in with an awl, cut around it, and then bevel all the way round it. So it's quite a simplistic design, really. The first thing we have to do is case the leather. So we wet it using a sponge or whatever, and make it quite wet on the surface, but then you let that soak in so that the pale colour starts to reappear, and then you can start tooling. But the first job will be to scratch the design. I'm using an engineer's scribe and a metal stencil of my logo, and I'm just gently scratching in the design. There you can see I've just very lightly scored the leather. I'm using a spray gun here to wet the leather rather than a sponge, and then as it goes pale I'm starting to use my swivel knife. It's quite tricky going around some of these letters. It's also tricky doing the big curves because it's very difficult to get them smooth. But this took a long time. You've got to be careful not to mark the leather while you're doing it with sharp nails and things. I did scratch the leather in a couple of places. I'm just showing you a little bit of this because, as I say, it took a long time. If the leather starts to dry out, respray it or re-wet it in places. Well, I have to say this was easier than I thought it would be. These look a bit awkward, these swivel knives, but they do what they're intended to do. You can understand the design. Here I'm starting to bevel. I'm using that big beveler made out of the bolt to start with, because that gives a nice smooth bevel on these big curves. And then I'm starting on some of the more intricate bits. My hand was in the way for a lot of this footage, so there's not an awful lot of it. But you can see I'm trying to keep the... I'm doing lots of little taps and keeping the tool moving. And there it is, all done, nice 3D design. I'm just burnishing the edge here. Here's the wet moulding I did earlier. I'm just removing the staples because they're only there temporarily to hold the leather in place while it dried. I'm trying the top on, just test fitting it, and then contact adhesive to both surfaces. You let it go tacky or dry and then place it together and hammer it together. And I'm using the stitching iron here just to go through the lower layer of leather, and there you can see the seat covers coming on. Then it's loads more saddle stitching. As I say, it's Ritzer Tiger pre-waxed thread 1mm, and this was really awkward to do. I'm using an awl as well here just to reopen the holes each time, because going through this thick leather it can be hard work otherwise, even though you've punched the holes. But it took me a long time, a lot of sore fingers doing this. It's very awkward coming it through from the inside. There's not a lot of space. Once the stitching's done, hammer it flat, and then marking out the foam. This is 3-inch foam, and then this spray adhesive is another contact adhesive. And I'm fitting the foam. I'm only putting adhesive on the top of the foam and on the bottom of the foam, not the sides. Then I'm inserting the base, which also has the upholstery adhesive on the top side of it, so it fixes it to the foam. You can see I've drilled some air holes in the base as well to allow the air to escape when the cushion is compressed. I'm wet moulding the sides around again. I've wetted the sides and then I'm stapling them into place. A bit of hammering. Then we let it dry overnight, and I was very happy with the result. Next day we got neat's foot oil or neat's foot compound. This stuff is brilliant at reviving older, dry, cracked leather, but it's also very good at treating, new veg tan leather, and it instantly makes the leather more flexible. It does smell quite strong to start with, but the smell does dissipate and you get that leather smell back. Don't worry if it looks a bit streaky when you first put it on. If you put enough of it on, all the streaks do disappear and it gradually soaks in. I've done the sides and the top, and it gives this lovely antique appearance. It doesn't offer any protection, so I do use some Aussie leather conditioner as well, which does proof the leather a little bit. Here I am screwing the legs back onto the base of the seat. Little Allen wrench there, and job done. Very pleased with that. That will darken with time. The leather will naturally darken and get that lovely antique look. But you can see it's quite squashy and very comfortable. Here's a few stills of the finished job. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share and subscribe. Give the video a thumbs up if you can. And subscribing costs nothing, and you'll be notified when I put out any extra videos. But yeah, I'll be doing a few more leather projects in the future, and I've actually got hold of an antique leather stitching machine which I'm going to restore, so I might do some leather machining at some point. Well, thanks again for watching.
Please like, share and subscribe. My daddy needs all the help he can get. More rubbish coming soon.
You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. I do put posts on there occasionally, and I do occasionally sell stuff on Etsy. I just need to get round to listing it.